Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me tremendous pleasure to announce the engagement of my grandson, Michael Carter, to the lovely Jessica Williams. Eleanor Carter's voice cut through the murmur of San Francisco's elite gathered in the Carter Mansion's grand ballroom. Michael felt his jaw tighten as applause erupted around him. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the faces of politicians, tech moguls, and old money families who had come to witness what they believed was a celebration. It felt more like a funeral to him. Jessica stepped closer, her perfectly manicured hand sliding possessively around his arm. Her smile was camera-ready, practiced for this exact moment. Michael had known this day would come since he turned 18, but standing here now, surrounded by the suffocating weight of expectation, he realized he couldn't breathe. "Smile, darling," Jessica whispered through her teeth, her grip tightening. "Everyone's watching." That was exactly the problem. Michael's eyes swept across the room, seeking an escape route that didn't exist. Then he saw her. A young woman in a simple black uniform was quietly collecting empty glasses near the French doors leading to the terrace. She moved with an efficiency that contrasted sharply with the theatrical nature of everything else in the room. When she looked up, their eyes met for just a moment. Something shifted in his chest. "Michael." Eleanor's voice carried a warning tone. She expected him to step forward, to play his part in this charade, to accept the congratulations and seal his fate. Instead, he walked toward the woman with the tray. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Sarah Mitchell looked up, genuinely startled. She hadn't expected the guest of honor to approach her, especially not with that intense look in his dark eyes. She'd been hired just that morning through a temp agency, told to keep her head down and do her job quietly. "Sir?" she managed, setting down the tray. "What's your name?" "Sarah, sir." "Sarah Mitchell." The ballroom had gone completely silent now. Michael was vaguely aware of his grandmother's sharp intake of breath, of Jessica's confused stammer behind him, of 200 pairs of eyes watching his every move. "Sarah," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her heart skip. "I need you to do something for me." She nodded, though confusion flickered across her features. "I need you to help me not make the biggest mistake of my life." Before she could ask what he meant, before his rational mind could talk him out of it, before the weight of family obligation could crush him completely, Michael cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The room exploded. Sarah's initial shock melted into something else entirely as his lips moved against hers. For a moment that stretched like eternity, nothing else existed except the warmth of his hands and the desperate intensity of his kiss. She should have pulled away, should have remembered where she was and who she was supposed to be, but instead she found herself kissing him back. "Michael!" Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. The spell broke. Sarah stepped back, her hand flying to her lips, her eyes wide with the realization of what had just happened. Around them, the ballroom buzzed with shocked whispers and the rapid clicking of cell phone cameras. Jessica's face had gone white, then red, then a mottled combination of both. "How dare you?" she hissed, but Michael wasn't looking at her. He was still looking at Sarah, who appeared to be processing the chaos with an odd sense of calm that intrigued him even more. "Security," Eleanor commanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Remove this woman immediately." 2 security guards appeared as if summoned from thin air, moving towards Sarah with professional efficiency. She didn't resist, didn't protest, didn't even look particularly surprised. She simply straightened her shoulders and allowed them to escort her toward the service entrance. "Wait," Michael called out, but Eleanor's hand clamped down on his wrist with surprising strength. "You will go to your room," she said quietly, her voice deadly calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Now, grandmother, Now, Michael." He looked once more toward the doorway where Sarah had disappeared, then at the faces surrounding him. Some showed shock, others poorly concealed delight at witnessing such a spectacular social disaster. Jessica was being comforted by her parents, her mother shooting venomous looks in his direction. Michael straightened his tie and walked out of his own engagement party. An hour later, he found himself standing outside Pinnacle Staffing Services on Market Street. The temp agency was closed, but through the glass doors he could see Sarah Mitchell sitting in the waiting area, still wearing her black uniform, speaking quietly with a middle-aged woman behind the desk. When she emerged, she wasn't surprised to see him leaning against his Tesla. "Mr. Carter," she said simply. I cost you your job. You cost yourself a fiancé. Her directness caught him off guard. He'd expected tears, anger, demands for money to keep quiet about what happened. Instead, she seemed almost amused by the situation. I want to offer you another job, he said. Doing what? Being my personal assistant. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of mockery or some kind of trap. You don't even know me. I know enough. What exactly do you think you know? Michael stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume. I know that when I kissed you in front of 200 people, you didn't scream or slap me or faint. You kissed me back, and then you handled the aftermath with more grace than anyone else in that room. Sarah's pulse quickened, but her expression remained neutral. And that qualifies me to be your assistant. That qualifies you to be someone I can trust. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words against the memory of his lips on hers and the very practical reality that she needed this job for reasons he couldn't possibly understand. When do I start? Sarah's first day as Michael Carter's personal assistant began at 6 in the morning in a glass tower that pierced the San Francisco skyline like a steel needle. The Carter Tech headquarters occupied 30 floors of prime real estate in the financial district, and Michael's corner office on the 28th floor offered a view that most people would kill for. Sarah wasn't most people. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the early commuters stream across the streets below like ants, while Michael reviewed her hastily assembled employment paperwork. The temp agency had worked overtime to process her transition, though she suspected Michael's influence had more to do with the speed than their efficiency. Your resume is interesting, Michael said without looking up. Stanford graduate, but you were working as a temp cleaner? Sarah turned from the window, her expression carefully neutral. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. What was your major? Business administration with a focus on corporate finance. Now he did look up, his dark eyes studying her face. You're overqualified to be anyone's assistant. Maybe I like being underestimated. The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to explore. Michael set down the papers and leaned back in his chair, taking in the woman who had turned his life upside down less than 24 hours ago. She looked different in professional attire. The black skirt and white blouse were conservative, appropriate, but they couldn't hide the intelligence in her green eyes or the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing the elegant line of her neck. Michael found himself remembering the taste of her lips. Your first task, he said, forcing his mind back to business, is to clear my calendar for the rest of the week. Reschedule everything non-essential. Hiding from the fallout. Regrouping. Sarah moved to the desk and began reviewing his appointment schedule on the computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, and Michael noticed she didn't need to ask where anything was or how the system worked. Most assistants required at least a day of orientation. Done, she said after 20 minutes. You have one unavoidable meeting this afternoon with the board of directors. I assume that's related to last night. Eleanor called an emergency session. Damage control. Will you need me there? No, but I'll need you to handle the media requests. My public relations team is drowning. As if summoned by his words, Michael's phone began buzzing with incoming calls. Sarah glanced at the display and smoothly intercepted the first one. Mr. Carter's office. This is Sarah speaking. I'm sorry, but Mr. Carter is unavailable for comment at this time. Thank you. She disconnected and immediately answered the next call with the same polished professionalism. Michael watched her field 6 calls in rapid succession, each time deflecting questions about the engagement party disaster with practiced ease. You've done this before, he observed when the calls briefly stopped. Crisis management is a useful skill. Before he could ask what kind of crises she'd managed, his office door flew open. Jessica Williams stormed in, her face flushed with anger and her usually perfect composure completely shattered. We need to talk, she announced, then stopped short when she saw Sarah. Alone. Sarah, could you give us a moment? Michael asked. Sarah nodded and gathered some files, but as she passed Jessica, the other woman grabbed her arm. I know what you're doing. Jessica hissed, her voice low but venomous. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you're going to get out of this, I'll stop you. Sarah looked down at Jessica's manicured fingers digging into her arm, then met her eyes with a steady gaze that made Jessica involuntarily step back. I don't play games, Miss Williams. I work for a living. The subtle emphasis on work wasn't lost on Jessica, whose family wealth had ensured she'd never held a real job in her life. Her face went red. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Neither do you. Sarah left the office, closing the door quietly behind her, but not before she caught the flash of something dangerous in Jessica's eyes. She'd made an enemy, but that had been inevitable the moment Michael kissed her. What Jessica didn't know was that Sarah had been preparing for this war long before last night. In her small apartment in the Mission District that evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a worn manila envelope spread open before her. The letter inside was written in her father's shaky handwriting, penned during his final days in the hospital 2 years ago. Sarah, it began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've finally decided to seek the truth about what the Carters did to our family. The documents you need are in William Carter's personal office. He kept everything, thinking it would protect him if things went bad. He was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about that. Find the safe behind the painting of the Golden Gate Bridge. The combination is your mother's birthday. Make them pay for what they stole from us. Sarah folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. She'd memorized every word months ago, but sometimes she needed to see her father's handwriting to remind herself why she was doing this. James Mitchell had died believing his former business partner had betrayed him, had stolen technology and profits that should have belonged to both families. He'd died broken and bitter, watching his daughter work multiple jobs to pay for his medical bills while the Carters lived in luxury built on what he claimed was stolen success. Sarah had spent the last 2 years planning her infiltration of the Carter family. Getting hired as temporary cleaning staff for the engagement party had been the first step. She'd expected to work her way slowly into the family's confidence, to eventually gain access to William Carter's old office. She hadn't expected Michael Carter to kiss her in front of 200 witnesses. She hadn't expected to kiss him back. And she definitely hadn't expected to feel her carefully constructed walls begin to crack when he looked at her with those dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her professional facade. Sarah closed the envelope and locked it in her desk drawer. Tomorrow she would continue playing her part, would work alongside Michael while looking for opportunities to access his grandfather's office. She would ignore the way her pulse quickened when he smiled, would forget the warmth of his hands on her face. She had a job to do, and 20 years of injustice to correct. The fact that she was falling for her target was a complication she couldn't afford. The Tesla hummed quietly along Highway 101 towards Silicon Valley, carrying Michael and Sarah to what should have been a routine acquisition meeting. 3 days had passed since the engagement party scandal, and while the media frenzy was beginning to die down, the tension between them had only intensified. Sarah stared out the passenger window at the rolling hills dotted with tech campuses, trying to ignore the way Michael's cologne filled the confined space of the car. She'd insisted on driving separately, but he'd dismissed the idea, claiming they needed to discuss strategy for the meeting. The strategy they discussed had lasted all of 10 minutes. You're quiet today, Michael observed, glancing at her as they passed the Facebook campus. I'm reviewing the acquisition files. You memorized those yesterday. Sarah closed the tablet and finally looked at him. Mr. Carter, I think we should establish some boundaries. Such as the fact that I work for you. What happened at the party was a one-time situation born out of desperation. It can't happen again. Michael's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Is that what you think it was? Desperation? Wasn't it? They were approaching the exit for Palo Alto, and Michael suddenly pulled off the highway into a scenic overlook. He parked the car and turned to face her fully. Sarah, I've been thinking about that kiss for 3 days straight. If that was just desperation, then I'm in serious trouble. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected corporate politeness, maybe some light flirtation, but not this raw admission that made her chest tighten. Michael, we can't. I'm your employee, and there are things about me that you don't understand. Then help me understand. For a moment, Sarah wavered. The intensity in his dark eyes, the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered, made her want to tell him everything. About her father, about the real reason she was working for him, about the documents she was searching for. Instead, she looked away. We should go. The meeting starts in an hour. Michael studied her profile, noting the tension in her shoulders and the way she avoided his gaze. There were secrets behind those green eyes, layers he was only beginning to glimpse. "All right," he said finally, starting the car. "But this conversation isn't over." The acquisition meeting took place in a sleek conference room at TechFlow Dynamics, a small but innovative company that had developed revolutionary data encryption software. Michael needed this acquisition to stay ahead of Carter Tech's competitors, but as the meeting progressed, he found himself distracted by Sarah's presence. She sat beside him, taking notes with professional efficiency, occasionally leaning close to whisper observations about the financial projections. Each time she moved closer, Michael caught her scent and had to force himself to concentrate on the discussion. "The encryption algorithm is impressive," Sarah murmured during a brief break, "but their server infrastructure is outdated. You'll need to factor in significant upgrade costs." "You caught that? It's in the fine print of their technical specifications. Most people wouldn't notice." Most people weren't Stanford graduates working as cleaning staff, Michael thought, but he kept the observation to himself. The meeting concluded successfully, with TechFlow's CEO agreeing to Carter Tech's terms. As they walked back to the parking garage, Michael's phone buzzed with a call from his cousin David. "I need to take this," he told Sarah. "David, what's going on?" "We have a problem." David's voice was tense. "I've been running some routine financial audits, and I'm seeing some irregular transactions. Money moving in and out of accounts that shouldn't have access to those funds." Michael stopped walking. "How much money?" "Small amounts, but consistent. Someone's been very careful to stay under the radar." "Michael, I think someone inside the company is either embezzling or setting us up for something bigger." Sarah pretended to check her phone, but she was listening to every word. Her heart rate quickened when David mentioned the financial irregularities. Had someone discovered her background checks on the company? "Can you trace the source?" Michael asked. "I'm working on it, but whoever's doing this knows our systems well. It has to be someone with high-level access." "Family, that's what I'm afraid of." Michael ended the call and stood silent for a moment, processing the implications. Sarah touched his arm gently. "Bad news." "Possibly. David thinks someone's manipulating our finances." Sarah's mind raced. She needed to access William Carter's office soon, before any investigation led back to her. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually, yes. I want you to coordinate with David tomorrow. Your background in corporate finance could be useful." The irony wasn't lost on her. Of course. They drove back to San Francisco in relative silence. But as they reached the city limits, Michael suddenly pulled into the parking lot of a small restaurant overlooking the bay. "I know you said we needed boundaries," he said, "but I also know we both need to eat. Have dinner with me. Not as your boss, just as Michael." Sarah knew she should refuse. Every moment she spent with him made her mission more complicated, made the growing feelings harder to ignore. But the hopeful look in his eyes, combined with the stress of David's phone call and the constant pressure of maintaining her cover, wore down her defenses. One dinner, she agreed. The restaurant was intimate, with soft lighting and a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. Over wine and seafood, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything except the obvious tension between them. "Tell me about your family," Michael said as they shared dessert. Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "There's not much to tell. My father died 2 years ago. Cancer. My mother passed when I was young." "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult." "It was." She looked out at the bridge, remembering how her father used to drive her across it when she was little, pointing out the landmarks and telling her stories about the city. "He worked very hard his whole life. Sometimes I think he worked himself to death." "What did he do?" "He was an entrepreneur. Tech industry. His business partner screwed him over, and he never recovered from it." Michael's expression grew serious. "That's terrible. Did he ever get justice?" Sarah met his eyes across the table. "Not yet." Something in her tone made Michael lean forward. "Sarah, what aren't you telling me?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Sarah felt the weight of her father's letter in her purse, the burden of secrets that grew heavier every day. Michael was looking at her with such genuine concern, such obvious care, that for a moment she almost told him everything. Instead, she stood abruptly. "I should go? Thank you for dinner." "Sarah, wait." She was already heading for the door, but Michael caught up with her in the parking lot. He gently caught her arm, turning her to face him. "Whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, you don't have to handle it alone." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Sarah looked up at him, seeing not the billionaire heir or her target, but simply a man who cared about her. The realization terrified her more than any threat Jessica Williams could make. "Michael, please, don't make this harder than it already is." "Make what harder?" Instead of answering, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly, pouring all her conflicted emotions into the brief contact. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Good night, Michael." She drove away, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot, more confused and captivated than ever. Back at Carter Tech headquarters, Eleanor Carter sat in her office reviewing security footage from the past week, her sharp eyes noting every interaction between her grandson and his new assistant. She'd already made some calls, put certain wheels in motion. Tomorrow, she would get answers about Sarah Mitchell. Robert Hayes had built his reputation on uncovering secrets that powerful people preferred to keep buried. Sitting across from Eleanor Carter in her pristine office, he recognized the familiar look of a woman who would pay any price to protect her family's interests. "I need everything on Sarah Mitchell," Eleanor said, sliding a thin file across her mahogany desk. "Employment history, family background, financial records, personal relationships. Everything." Robert flipped through the sparse information. "This won't take long. She's either very clean or very good at hiding things." "In my experience, Mr. Hayes, people who appear too clean usually have the most to hide." "What's your timeline?" 48 hours. Robert raised an eyebrow. "That's aggressive, even for me." Eleanor opened her checkbook. "I'm sure you'll manage." 3 floors below, Michael was having his own confrontation. He'd called Jessica to his office, intending to end their engagement officially and cleanly. Instead, she'd arrived with her father, Richard Williams, and a lawyer. "This is ridiculous, Michael," Richard was saying, his face red with indignation. "One moment of foolishness doesn't negate years of planning. Our families have been preparing for this merger since you were both teenagers." "Merger?" Michael stood behind his desk, his patience wearing thin. "Is that what you think this is? A business transaction?" "All marriages in our circle are business transactions," the lawyer interjected. "The prenuptial agreement alone represents millions in shared assets and partnership opportunities, which is exactly why I'm ending it." Jessica had been unusually quiet during the meeting, but now she leaned forward in her chair. "It's her, isn't it? Your little cleaning girl. Michael, you can't possibly be serious about throwing away everything for some nobody." "Sarah Mitchell isn't a nobody." "Oh, but she is." Jessica smiled with cold satisfaction. "I've done some research of my own. Did you know she's been unemployed for the better part of 2 years? Living in a tiny apartment in the Mission, working whatever temp jobs she can find. What exactly do you think she wants from you?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Get out." "Michael, be reasonable," Richard tried again. "Whatever infatuation you have with this woman will pass. Jessica is willing to overlook your indiscretion." "How generous of her." "The answer is still no." The lawyer opened his briefcase. "Mr. Carter, breaking this engagement could result in significant financial penalties. The Williams family has already made substantial investments based on the understanding that this union would proceed. Send me the bill." After they left, Michael sat alone in his office, staring out at the city below. The weight of their words lingered, not because he doubted his decision, but because they'd voiced concerns he'd been trying to ignore. What did he really know about Sarah Mitchell? His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter? Ms. Mitchell is here with the quarterly reports you requested." "Send her in." Sarah entered carrying a stack of files, but Michael could tell immediately that something was different. There was an energy about her, a tension that seemed barely contained. "The reports are complete," she said, setting them on his desk. "Is there anything else you need me to handle today?" "Actually, yes. I need to access my grandfather's old office. Do you know if it's still maintained?" Sarah's pulse quickened, but her expression remained neutral. "I believe it's on the executive floor, but it's been locked since his death. Would you like me to contact building maintenance for the key?" "That would be helpful." An hour later, Sarah stood outside William Carter's preserved office, her heart pounding as the maintenance supervisor unlocked the door. The room was exactly as it had been left 15 years ago, down to the papers still scattered across the massive desk, and the painting of the Golden Gate Bridge hanging prominently on the far wall. "Will you need anything else, Ms. Mitchell?" the supervisor asked. "No, thank you. Mr. Carter just wanted me to inventory the contents for insurance purposes." Once alone, Sarah moved quickly to the painting. Her father's letter had been specific about the location, and sure enough, behind the frame was a small wall safe. She tried her mother's birthday, and the lock clicked open. Inside were dozens of documents, contracts, and correspondence dating back decades. Sarah's hands shook as she found what she was looking for. The original partnership agreement between James Mitchell and William Carter, along with subsequent contracts that clearly showed how William had systematically pushed her father out of deals and stolen proprietary technology. The evidence was damning and detailed. Her father had been right about everything. Find what you were looking for? Sarah spun around to find Michael standing in the doorway. Her face went white as she realized the documents were still scattered across the desk behind her. Michael, I can explain. He stepped into the room, his eyes taking in the open safe, the papers, and Sarah's guilty expression. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my assistant has been breaking into my family's private files. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Sarah's mind raced. She could lie, could make up some story about following his instructions. But looking at Michael's face, she realized she was tired of lying to him. My name is Sarah Mitchell, she said quietly. My father was James Mitchell. Michael's expression didn't change, but she saw the moment recognition hit him. The partner who sued my grandfather. The partner your grandfather betrayed and destroyed. Sarah, no, let me finish. She picked up one of the contracts with shaking hands. 20 years ago, my father and your grandfather were equal partners in developing network security protocols. These documents prove that William Carter systematically excluded my father from lucrative contracts, used his technology without compensation, and eventually forced him out of the company entirely. Michael stepped closer, studying her face. So you came here for revenge. I came here for justice. By lying to me? By pretending to be someone you're not? Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but her voice remained steady. Everything I told you about my father dying was true. He spent his last 2 years broke and bitter, watching me work multiple jobs to pay for his medical bills while your family lived in luxury built on what he created. Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing the revelation. So the kiss, the job, everything we've shared, it was all an act. It started that way. Sarah's voice broke. But Michael, what I feel for you is real. That's the problem. I came here to destroy your family, and instead I fell in love with you. The confession hung between them like a physical presence. Michael looked at the documents spread across the desk, then back at Sarah's tear-stained face. You fell in love with me? Yes, and I hate myself for it. Because there are things about this situation, about what your family did to mine, that you could never forgive, even if you wanted to. Michael moved to the desk and picked up one of the contracts, scanning the legal language that clearly favored Carter interests over Mitchell interests. These documents, if they're authentic, they could destroy Carter Tech's reputation. They're authentic. What are you planning to do with them? Sarah wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. I don't know anymore. 2 weeks ago, I would have taken them straight to the press. But now what? Now I know that destroying your family means destroying you, and I can't do that. Michael set down the contract and looked at her for a long moment. Sarah, I don't. She started gathering the documents. Don't say anything you might regret. Just let me finish what I came here to do, and then I'll disappear from your life. What if I don't want you to disappear? The question stopped her cold. Michael, you don't understand. This isn't just about the documents. There are things I've done, plans I've made. You think Jessica Williams is your problem? You have no idea what's coming. Before he could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and went pale. I have to go. Sarah, wait. But she was already gone, leaving Michael alone with his grandfather's secrets and the devastating realization that the woman he was falling for might be the key to his family's destruction. The text message had been from a number she didn't recognize. We need to talk. Meet me at Pier 39 in 1 hour. Come alone. R. Hayes. Sarah stared at the message as she drove through the city, her mind racing. Someone was onto her, and she had a sinking feeling that her time was running out. The fog rolled across Pier 39 like a gray blanket, muffling the sounds of tourists and street performers. Sarah found Robert Hayes waiting by the railing overlooking Alcatraz, his weathered face impassive as he watched her approach. Ms. Mitchell, he said without turning around. Or should I say, Miss Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, daughter of James Robert Mitchell, former partner of William Carter? Sarah's blood went cold, but she kept walking until she stood beside him at the railing. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. We both know why you're here. Robert finally looked at her, his gray eyes sharp and calculating. Eleanor Carter hired me to investigate you. What she didn't expect was for me to find quite so much. He pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through files. Born in Portland, Oregon. Moved to San Francisco when you were 8 after your parents' business partnership dissolved. Father struggled with various failed ventures until his death from a stress-induced heart attack 2 years ago. You've been planning this infiltration for at least 18 months. What do you want? Nothing from you. I'm simply delivering a message from Mrs. Carter. She knows who you are, she knows what you're after, and she's prepared to destroy you if you don't disappear quietly. Sarah gripped the railing harder. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning, Michael Carter will receive a comprehensive file detailing your deception, complete with bank records showing the multiple loans you took out to finance this little revenge plot and surveillance footage of you casing Carter Tech headquarters 6 months ago. The fog seemed to thicken around them as Sarah processed the threat. Eleanor Carter had outmaneuvered her completely. How long have you known? I suspected from the beginning. Young women with Stanford MBAs don't usually work as temporary cleaning staff unless they have ulterior motives. But I'll give you credit. You played the part well. You almost had him completely fooled. He deserves to know the truth about his grandfather. The truth. Robert laughed coldly. The truth is that your father was a mediocre businessman who got in over his head with someone much smarter. William Carter didn't steal anything. He simply outplayed a weaker opponent. That's not what the documents show. Documents can be interpreted many ways, Ms. Mitchell, and without proper legal context, they're just pieces of paper. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Where are you? We need to finish our conversation. Robert noticed her distraction. He's looking for you. You have a choice to make. Walk away now, or watch me destroy any chance you have of a future with him. You think I care about my future with him? I think you care more than you're willing to admit. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood outside Michael's office door, her hands shaking as she prepared to end everything. She'd made her choice on the pier, but not the one Robert Hayes expected. She knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Michael looked up from his desk, relief flooding his features. Sarah, thank God. I was worried that. Michael, I need to tell you everything. Something in her tone made him stand up. What's wrong? My name is Sarah Mitchell, and my father was James Mitchell, your grandfather's former business partner. I know. You told me in the office. No, you don't understand. 20 years ago, your grandfather didn't just push my father out of their partnership. He systematically stole his technology, excluded him from contracts that should have been shared, and used legal maneuvers to force him into bankruptcy. Sarah pulled out copies of the documents she'd found. These prove that William Carter committed corporate fraud on a massive scale. My father lost everything. His business, his savings, his health. He died believing he was a failure, when really he was the victim of a deliberate criminal conspiracy. Michael stared at the papers, his face growing pale. Sarah, even if this is true, it is true. And that's not all. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more determined. I've been planning this for 2 years. Getting close to your family, gaining access to the company, finding evidence to expose what really happened. Everything I've done since I met you has been calculated to destroy the Carter name. The words hit Michael like physical blows. Everything. The job, the access to your life, even accepting your dinner invitation, it was all part of the plan. And us? What we've shared. Sarah met his eyes, and for a moment her composure cracked. That was never supposed to happen. Michael walked around the desk, his movements controlled but dangerous. So when you kissed me back at the party, when you told me you were falling in love with me, when you let me believe that what we had was real, all of that was a lie? No, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being an act. I fell in love with you for real, and now I don't know what to do because I can't destroy you, but I can't abandon my father's memory either. Michael's expression had grown cold, distant. 2 years of planning. That's impressive dedication. Michael, please listen to me. 2 years of scheming to get close to my family so you could tear us down. And I made it easy for you, didn't I? Kissing you at the party, hiring you as my assistant, giving you access to everything. It wasn't like that. What was the end game, Sarah? Public humiliation? Financial ruin? Or were you planning to string me along until you had enough evidence to take us to court? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I used to know, but then I got to know you, and you're nothing like what I expected. You're kind and genuine and stupid enough to fall for a con artist. The words were like a slap. That's not fair. Fair. Michael's voice rose. You want to talk about fair? You lied to me about everything. Your name, your background, your reasons for being here. You let me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist. I exist. The person you fell for is real, even if the circumstances weren't. No, she's not real. She's a character you created to manipulate me. The real Sarah Mitchell is someone who spent 2 years plotting against my family, someone who could smile at me and kiss me while planning our destruction. Sarah stepped closer, desperate to make him understand. Michael, I know how this looks, but what I feel for you is genuine. That's why I'm telling you the truth now, instead of going through with my original plan. Your original plan, Michael repeated, his voice bitter. Which was what, exactly? Seduce me and then destroy me? I never meant for things to go this far. I was supposed to get the evidence and leave, but then you kissed me and everything changed. Everything changed, Michael said slowly. Everything except the fact that you've been lying to me from the moment we met. I was protecting my family's memory by destroying mine. They stared at each other across the expanse of his office, the weight of betrayal and conflicted emotions filling the space between them. Sarah could see the exact moment when Michael's heart closed off to her, when the man who had looked at her with such tenderness turned into a stranger. Get out, he said quietly. Michael, get out of my office, get out of my building, and get out of my life. If I see you again, I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage. You don't mean that. I mean every word. You want to destroy the Carter family? Congratulations, Sarah. You succeeded. You just destroyed the wrong Carter. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, watching the man she loved turn away from her completely. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but nothing could have readied her for the pain of seeing her own heartbreak reflected in his eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I, Michael replied without turning around. I'm sorry I ever met you. The words followed Sarah out of the building and into the San Francisco twilight, where the fog seemed to swallow her whole. Sarah's apartment felt smaller than usual as she sat on her worn couch, staring at the manila envelope that had started everything. 3 days had passed since Michael threw her out of his office. 3 days of replaying their confrontation and wondering if she could have handled things differently. The original documents from William Carter's safe lay spread across her coffee table, along with copies she'd made before returning to the office that devastating afternoon. She'd come so close to her goal, had the evidence to expose the Carter family's lies, but every time she reached for her phone to call a journalist, she saw Michael's face and couldn't do it. Her father would have been furious. You're weak, she whispered to herself, echoing words James Mitchell had spoken during his bitter final months. They destroyed us, and you're protecting them because of some schoolgirl crush. But it wasn't a crush, and that was the problem. Sarah had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the man she'd set out to destroy. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't tearing her apart. A knock at her door interrupted her self-recrimination. Sarah checked the peephole and felt her heart stop. Michael stood in the hallway, looking haggard and exhausted, his usually pristine appearance disheveled. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. What are you doing here? I came to return these, Michael said, holding up a small box. Your personal items from the office. Sarah took the box, noting how careful he was not to let their fingers touch. You could have had them messengered. I needed to see you. Why? Michael's jaw worked as if he was struggling with the words. Because I've spent 3 days trying to hate you, and I can't. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Sarah stepped aside, and Michael entered her small apartment, taking in the modest furnishings and the documents scattered on her table. You kept copies, he observed. Yes. Planning to use them? Sarah closed the door and leaned against it. I don't know. Every time I think about it, I remember how you looked when I told you the truth. I can't be responsible for putting that expression on your face again. Michael moved to the table and picked up one of the contracts. I've been going through my grandfather's old files, cross-referencing with company records from that time period. And your father was right. About everything. Michael's voice was hollow. William Carter systematically excluded James Mitchell from profitable contracts. used his technology without compensation, and manipulated legal agreements to force him out. Sarah felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. I'm sorry you had to find that out. Are you? Because part of me thinks you're glad I know what kind of family I come from. No, Michael. I never wanted you to be hurt by this. That's why I've been sitting here for 3 days instead of calling every journalist in the city. Michael set down the contract and looked at her directly for the first time since entering. You're not going to expose this? I can't destroy you to avenge my father. I won't let myself become the kind of person who uses love as a weapon. Love, Michael repeated softly. Yes, love. Real, stupid, inconvenient love that's ruined everything I planned for 2 years. They stared at each other across the small space, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Michael took a step closer. Sarah, what if there was another way? What do you mean? What if we could get justice for your father without destroying innocent people? Before Sarah could respond, Michael's phone rang. He glanced at the display and grimaced. It's Eleanor. I should take this. Michael, where are you? Eleanor's voice was sharp even through the phone speaker. We need to discuss this situation with the Mitchell girl. I'm handling it, grandmother. No, you're not. You're letting emotional attachment cloud your judgment. Come home immediately. We need to discuss damage control. Michael ended the call and looked at Sarah. She knows I'm here. How? Eleanor knows everything that happens in this family. The question is what else she knows. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? I've been thinking about something you said. About my grandfather keeping those documents as insurance. What if Eleanor knew about them? What if she's known about the fraud all along? The possibility hit Sarah like a cold wave. If she knew, then she's been covering it up for years. Which means she's as guilty as William was. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. If you're not home in 1 hour, I'm calling the police to report a break-in at the office. The Mitchell girl had access to sensitive documents. Sarah read the message over his shoulder. She's threatening me. She's threatening us both. Michael put his phone away. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, when you were in my grandfather's office, did you take anything besides copies of those documents? No, nothing else. Why? Because Eleanor seems to think you did, and she's prepared to have you arrested for theft. Sarah's face went pale. Michael, I swear to you, I only took copies. The originals are right here. I believe you, but Eleanor doesn't care about the truth. She cares about protecting the family name. Even if it means framing an innocent person, especially then. Sarah moved to her desk and pulled out the original documents. Take these back to her. Tell her I returned everything. That won't be enough. She wants you gone, permanently. Then I'll leave San Francisco. I'll disappear, and you'll never have to see me again. Michael caught her hands as she tried to hand him the papers. What if I don't want you to disappear? Michael, we can't. Too much has happened. There's too much history between our families. History that neither of us created, but history we both have to live with. Michael's grip on her hands tightened. Sarah, I love you. The words were spoken so quietly, she almost missed them. What? I love you. Not the person I thought you were, but the person you actually are. The woman who spent 2 years planning revenge but couldn't go through with it because she fell in love with her target. The woman who's been sitting in this apartment for 3 days, choosing love over justice. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. Michael, it doesn't matter how we feel. Your family will never accept me, and I'll always be the woman who lied to you. Then we'll deal with those things together. You don't understand what you're saying. If Eleanor knows about my investigation, she probably knows about the surveillance, the planning, everything. She could destroy my life with a phone call. Not if I stop her first. Sarah looked at him in confusion. How? Michael's expression grew determined. By beating her at her own game. Eleanor thinks she holds all the cards, but she doesn't know that I've been investigating too. And I think I know exactly what she's been hiding all these years. What are you talking about? Tomorrow, I'm going to confront my grandmother with evidence of her own crimes. And when I do, I want you there with me. Michael, that's too dangerous. If she's willing to frame me for theft, imagine what she'll do if you threaten to expose her. Then we better make sure we have enough evidence to protect ourselves. Sarah stared at him, seeing the same determination in his eyes that had driven her own quest for justice. You're serious about this? I'm serious about you. About us. And I'm serious about making sure my family finally pays for what they did to yours. For the first time in 3 days, Sarah felt something other than despair. It was dangerous and probably foolish, but it was also hope. What do you need me to do? Michael's plan was simple in concept, but dangerous in execution. At 6 in the morning, he and Sarah sat in his car outside Carter Tech headquarters, reviewing the evidence they'd compiled through the night. The banking records David found show Eleanor has been moving money through shell companies for years, Michael said, handing Sarah a tablet. Look at the dates. They correspond exactly with major business deals that should have benefited your father's estate. Sarah scrolled through the financial data, her anger growing with each transaction. She's been profiting from the fraud for decades. These payments, they're not just covering up the original crime. She's been actively stealing from settlements that should have gone to victims' families. There's more. Michael pulled up another file. I found correspondence between Eleanor and Richard Williams dating back 5 years. The engagement to Jessica wasn't just about social standing. Williams' investment group has been helping Eleanor launder the stolen profits. So Jessica's family is involved too? Up to their necks. The marriage wasn't arranged for social reasons. It was a business partnership designed to legitimize dirty money. Sarah stared at the evidence, pieces of a much larger puzzle falling into place. Michael, if this is true, then Eleanor hasn't just been covering up your grandfather's crimes. She's been expanding them. Which means she'll do anything to stop us from exposing her. As if summoned by his words, Michael's phone rang. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Sarah warned. I have to. If I don't show up for our meeting, she'll know something's wrong. Michael accepted the call, putting it on speaker. Good morning, grandmother. Michael, I trust you handled the Mitchell situation last night. It's taken care of. Good. I need you in my office in 10 minutes. We have urgent family business to discuss. The call ended abruptly. Michael and Sarah exchanged looks. She knows, Sarah said. Maybe. Or maybe she's just being her usual controlling self. Michael, promise me something. If this goes wrong, if she tries to turn this against me, you'll walk away. Don't sacrifice your future for mine. We're in this together now. 20 minutes later, they stood outside Eleanor's office. Michael had hidden a recording device in his jacket pocket, while Sarah remained in the hallway, listening through the door. You look tired, Michael, Eleanor observed as he entered. I hope your evening wasn't too stressful. Nothing I couldn't handle. Eleanor moved to her window, gazing out at the city below. The Mitchell girl, she's gone? Yes. And the documents she stole? Returned. Eleanor turned, her sharp eyes studying her grandson's face. You're lying. Excuse me. I've known you since birth, Michael. I know when you're lying. Eleanor pressed a button on her desk. Security, please escort Ms. Mitchell to my office. She's waiting in the hallway. Michael's blood went cold as the door opened, and Sarah was brought in by 2 security guards. Eleanor had known they were there all along. Sit down, both of you, Eleanor commanded. When they remained standing, the guards moved closer. Michael and Sarah reluctantly took seats across from Eleanor's desk. Now then, Eleanor said, settling into her chair like a queen holding court. Let's discuss what you think you've discovered. We know about the shell companies, Michael said. We know about the money laundering, the continued theft from fraud victims, and the arrangement with the Williams family. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Impressive detective work. Though I'm disappointed you felt the need to involve an outsider in family business. Sarah isn't an outsider. She's the daughter of one of your victims. James Mitchell was a weak man who couldn't compete in a demanding business environment. His failures were his own. Sarah spoke for the first time since entering the room. My father trusted your husband. They were partners. Partnership is just another word for competition, dear. William simply proved more capable. William committed fraud, Sarah said, her voice rising. And you've been covering it up for 20 years while stealing money that belonged to the families he destroyed. Eleanor smiled coldly. Prove it. Michael leaned forward. We have bank records, correspondence, financial statements. You have copies of documents that could have been fabricated by anyone with basic computer skills. You have theories and assumptions, but no actual proof that would hold up in court. Sarah felt her heart sink. Eleanor was right. Everything they had was circumstantial. However, Eleanor continued, I do have proof of actual crimes. Ms. Mitchell, breaking into secure areas, stealing confidential documents, and attempting to extort money from my family. Michael, aiding and abetting corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can't be serious, Michael said. I'm completely serious. Unless you both agree to my terms, I'll have you arrested within the hour. The room fell silent except for the sound of traffic far below. Eleanor reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Jessica Williams will be here shortly to discuss the resumption of your engagement, Michael. Ms. Mitchell will sign a non-disclosure agreement and leave San Francisco permanently. In exchange, no charges will be filed. And if we refuse? Sarah asked. Then you'll both discover how unpleasant prison can be. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and felt a surge of hope. The message was from David, package delivered as requested. Grandmother, Michael said, standing up. Before we make any decisions, I think you should know that copies of all our evidence have been sent to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, along with a full confession from Richard Williams. Eleanor's composed mask slipped for the first time. What are you talking about? David intercepted Williams this morning. Faced with evidence of money laundering and racketeering charges, he decided cooperation was his best option. He's provided a full statement about your financial arrangements, including details about planned insurance fraud and tax evasion. The color drained from Eleanor's face. You're bluffing. Michael's phone rang. He answered it on speaker. Michael, it's David. The FBI agents are in the lobby. They have warrants for financial records going back 20 years. Eleanor stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward. You have no idea what you've done. This family, this company, everything your grandfather built, was built on lies and theft, Sarah interrupted. And now it's over. The office door opened, and Jessica Williams entered with her father and the same lawyer from their previous meeting. They stopped short when they saw Sarah. What is she doing here? Jessica demanded. Ms. Williams, Eleanor said, her voice strained. We need to postpone our discussion. There have been some complications. Richard Williams looked around the room, taking in the tense atmosphere and Eleanor's pale complexion. What kind of complications? The kind that require excellent legal representation, Michael said. I'd recommend you call your attorneys. All of you. Jessica's eyes narrowed as she processed the situation. You think you're so clever, don't you? Choosing your little nobody over everything your family has worked for? I'm choosing truth over corruption. Truth. Jessica laughed bitterly. The truth is that she seduced you as part of some revenge plot. The truth is that you're throwing away billions of dollars for a woman who's been lying to you from day one. The truth, Sarah said, standing to face Jessica, is that your family has been helping the Carters steal money from fraud victims for decades. The truth is that you're just as guilty as they are. Jessica's composure finally cracked. You have no proof of anything. It's your word against ours, and who do you think people will believe? Michael pulled out his phone and played a recording of Eleanor's earlier threats. I think they'll believe this. The sound of Eleanor's voice discussing covering up crimes and threatening false charges filled the room. Jessica's face went white as she realized the implications. You recorded us? She whispered. Every word. Heavy footsteps in the hallway announced the arrival of federal agents. Eleanor sank back into her chair, finally looking every one of her 78 years. Michael, she said quietly, you've destroyed everything. No, grandmother. I've finally stopped pretending that everything was worth protecting. As FBI agents entered the office, Michael took Sarah's hand. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The Carter family empire was crumbling, but from its ashes, something honest and real was finally being born. 2 years later, the federal courthouse in downtown San Francisco was finally quiet. The last of the appeals had been denied, the final sentences handed down. Eleanor Carter received 12 years for money laundering and conspiracy. Richard Williams got 8 years for financial fraud. Jessica Williams, who had cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence, served 6 months and was barred from working in finance. Michael stood on the courthouse steps, watching the media crews pack up their equipment. The Carter family name, once synonymous with innovation and success, was now associated with one of the largest corporate fraud cases in California history. Any regrets? David asked, joining his cousin on the steps. Michael considered the question. He'd lost his inheritance, his social standing, and the company that had defined his family for 3 generations. Carter Tech had been sold to pay restitution to fraud victims, and the Carter name had been stripped from buildings across the city. None, he said finally. Even though you gave up billions? especially because of that. The money Michael had inherited from his personal trust fund, money that predated his grandfather's crimes, had gone entirely to establishing the Mitchell Foundation for Corporate Transparency. The foundation provided legal aid to small business owners who'd been victimized by larger corporations and funded research into ethical business practices. It was meaningful work, but Michael would have traded it all for one thing he'd lost in the process. "Any word from Sarah?" David asked quietly. Michael shook his head. After the FBI raid, Sarah had disappeared. She'd testified during the trials via video conference from an undisclosed location, but she'd made it clear she wanted no contact with Michael or anyone connected to the Carter family. "She made her choice," Michael said. "I have to respect that." But respecting her choice didn't make it hurt less. 300 miles north, in the small coastal town of Brookings, Oregon, Sarah Mitchell finished her last class of the day and walked across the campus of the local community college. She'd been teaching business ethics and corporate finance for 18 months, finding unexpected satisfaction in helping young people understand the importance of integrity in business. Her students knew her as Professor Mitchell, a dedicated teacher who'd worked in corporate finance before choosing education. They had no idea she'd been at the center of one of the biggest fraud cases in recent history. Sarah had legally changed back to her full name, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, and had tried to build a quiet life far from the media attention that had surrounded the trials. She lived in a small cottage near the ocean, graded papers to the sound of waves, and told herself she was content. She was lying. Every morning, she checked news about the Mitchell Foundation, reading articles about Michael's work with victims' rights organizations and corporate reform. She'd watched from afar as he'd sacrificed everything to right his family's wrongs, and her heart broke a little more each time she saw his picture. She loved him. That had never changed. But too much had happened between them. Too much pain and betrayal and loss. Some things, she'd convinced herself, couldn't be repaired. On a foggy Thursday evening in March, Sarah was walking home from the grocery store when she saw a familiar figure sitting on her front porch. Michael Carter looked older, wearier, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. He was wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual expensive suits, and his hair was longer than she remembered. "Hello, Sarah." She stood frozen on her garden path, groceries forgotten in her hands. "How did you find me?" "It took me 8 months and 3 private investigators. You're very good at disappearing." "I had good reasons." Michael stood up slowly, as if sudden movements might spook her. "I know. I just hoped that maybe, after all this time, those reasons might have changed." Sarah walked past him to unlock her front door, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. "Why are you here, Michael?" "Because I wanted you to know that I finally did what I should have done 2 years ago. Which was, I made things right. All of it. The foundation has helped over 200 families recover stolen assets. We've lobbied for stronger corporate transparency laws. We've funded legal aid clinics in 12 states. Sarah turned to face him. "That's wonderful, Michael. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." "I didn't do it to impress you." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because I wanted you to know that your father's death wasn't in vain. The work you started, the truth you uncovered, it's made a real difference." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "My father would have been proud. So would you, if you'd let yourself be part of it." Sarah opened her door, but didn't invite him in. "Michael, what happened between us was complicated and painful and messy," he finished. "But it was also real. The love we felt, the connection we shared, that wasn't part of your plan or my naivety. That was just us. It doesn't matter anymore. It's the only thing that matters." Michael stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. "Sarah, I've spent 2 years trying to build something meaningful with my life, but every morning I wake up knowing that the most meaningful thing I ever had was what we shared. We built our relationship on lies. We built our relationship on truth. Everything else was just circumstances." Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Michael, I can't go back to that world. I can't be part of the Carter legacy. There is no Carter legacy anymore. There's just me, asking the woman I love to help me build something new." "What are you talking about?" Michael pulled out a business plan from his jacket. "Educational technology. Software that teaches business ethics to college students. We could start here, in Oregon, with your students as our first test group." Sarah stared at the detailed proposal, seeing her own teaching philosophy reflected in the curriculum design. You want to start a company? Together? I want to start a life. Together. The company is just how we'll pay for it. She looked up at him, seeing not the billionaire heir she'd once plotted against, but simply a man who'd given up everything to do what was right. Michael, what if it doesn't work? What if we can't get past everything that happened? Then at least we'll have tried. But Sarah, I know you. I know the woman who chose love over revenge, who walked away from her chance at payback because she couldn't bear to hurt someone she cared about. That woman is worth fighting for. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, remembering the feeling of his arms around her, the way he'd looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago, she said finally. Neither am I. We're both better. She opened the door wider. Would you like to come in? I was about to make dinner. Michael's smile was brighter than the Oregon sunset. I'd love to. 18 months later, Mitchell Carter Educational Technologies occupied a renovated warehouse in downtown Portland, employing 12 people and serving colleges across the Pacific Northwest. Their software had won 3 industry awards and was being piloted by universities nationwide. But none of that mattered as much as the small ceremony taking place in Sarah's cottage garden. The wedding was intimate, just David Carter as best man, Sarah's college roommate as maid of honor, and a handful of friends and colleagues. No media, no society photographers, no elaborate displays of wealth. Just 2 people who'd found their way back to each other through truth and forgiveness. Do you, Michael, take Sarah to be your wife? The minister asked. I do, Michael said, his voice steady and sure. I take her not despite our complicated history, but because of it. Because she made me a better man. And do you, Sarah, take Michael to be your husband? Sarah looked into the eyes of the man who'd sacrificed everything for justice, who'd chosen love over legacy. I do, she said. I take him because he showed me that sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful with the person you love. As they kissed, the Pacific Ocean crashed against the cliffs below, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt unlimited. The Mitchell Foundation continued its work, helping victims of corporate fraud reclaim their lives. Mitchell Carter Educational Technologies grew into a national company, teaching the next generation of business leaders about integrity and accountability. And in their cottage by the sea, Michael and Sarah Carter built a life based on honesty, partnership, and the kind of love that survives even the deepest betrayals. Some stories end with justice served. Others end with love triumphant. The best stories end with both.